Britain loves to call itself the birthplace of modern democracy. But look a little closer and that democracy is starting to crack. Scandals, donor influence, politics built on slogans instead of real solutions. Meanwhile, 7,000 miles away, a tiny island once dismissed as too small to survive has built one of the most efficient, corruption-free, and future-focused governments on Earth. This isn't East versus West. It's a story about what happens when a country decides that politics isn't a game. It's an engineering project. So today, let's explore 10 things Britain can learn from Singapore, and why the future of democracy might look less like Westminster and more like Singapore. Lesson 1. Governance isn't about charisma, it's about competence. In Britain, politics often feels like theater. Charismatic leaders rise and fall based on how well they perform in front of the camera, not how well they perform for the country. But in Singapore, politics works differently. Here, leaders are selected, not just elected. They go through rigorous vetting tested for integrity, discipline, and their ability to serve, not just speak. The idea is simple. Politics isn't show business, it's nation building. Singapore's founding leader, Kuan Yew, once said, "If you can't solve problems, you have no business in politics." That mindset created a culture where competence comes before charisma, and results matter more than rhetoric. And maybe that's one lesson Britain could use right now, because good speeches don't build strong systems. Competent governance does. Lesson 2. Long-term vision beats short-term election cycles. One of the biggest differences between Britain and Singapore isn't just geography, it's time. In Britain, politics moves in short bursts, 5-year cycles, endless campaigns. Every new government promises to fix what the last one broke, and then the cycle repeats. It's like trying to build a skyscraper, but tearing down the foundation every election. Singapore, on the other hand, plays the long game. Its leaders plan not just for the next 5 years, but for the next 50. When Singapore decided to build world-class housing, it didn't start with politics, it started with a plan. Today, more than 80% of Singaporeans live in homes built under that vision: stable, affordable, and generational. The same goes for infrastructure. Projects like Changi Airport's Terminal 5 or Tuas Mega Port were mapped out decades before they were even built. Because Singapore's government doesn't ask, "Will this win votes next year?" It asks, "Will this still make sense when our children are running the country?" That's a rare kind of patience, the kind Britain used to have during its industrial rise. But somewhere along the way, short-term politics replaced long-term purpose. And maybe that's the quiet lesson here. You can't run a nation like a campaign. You run it like a marathon, where every decision is a brick in the foundation of the next generation. Lesson 3. Zero tolerance for corruption. In Britain, corruption doesn't always look like a brown envelope under the table. It's quieter campaign donations, lobbying, private contracts, favors for friends. It's the kind of corruption that hides behind legal paperwork. But in Singapore, even the hint of corruption can end a political career overnight. When Kuan Yew founded modern Singapore, he made one thing absolutely clear: no corruption, no exceptions. He believed corruption wasn't just a crime, it was a cancer. It eats away at trust, at merit, and at the idea that anyone can rise by hard work. That's why Singapore pays its ministers well to remove temptation, but holds them to one of the strictest standards of integrity anywhere in the world. No secret donors, no corporate lobbying, no hidden favors. If a Singaporean politician is caught lying or taking money, it's over instantly. That system doesn't just punish corruption, it prevents it. It's why Singapore consistently ranks among the least corrupt nations on Earth. And it's why British citizens, frustrated by scandals and misuse of public funds, might look east and ask what would happen if integrity wasn't optional, but expected. Lesson 4. Politics without donors. In Britain, politics runs on money. Campaigns cost millions. Parties depend on wealthy donors, corporate sponsors, and interest groups to stay alive. And when money funds politics, money also shapes it. It's an open secret. You can't bite the hand that feeds you. If a donor helps you win an election, are you really free to vote against their interests later? Singapore looked at that problem and made a radical decision. Remove money from the equation. Here, politicians don't rely on billionaires or corporations to fund their campaigns. Campaign spending is tightly regulated, party funding is transparent, and private donations are capped or banned. That means Singaporean leaders can focus on policies, not fundraising dinners. They don't spend half their time calling donors or cutting backroom deals. They spend it governing. It's a system designed to keep politics clean and power accountable only to the people. Now imagine if Britain or any Western democracy tried that. No more billionaire donors. No more corporate lobbying. Just competence, transparency, and service. That's not fantasy, that's Singapore's reality. Lesson 5. Accountability without chaos. In Britain, accountability often comes after disaster. A scandal breaks. A minister resigns. A new face steps in, same story, different name. It's accountability by drama, loud, emotional, and public. But here's the catch. It doesn't always lead to better governance. It just resets the headlines. Singapore does it differently. Here, accountability isn't about spectacle, it's about systems. When mistakes happen, investigations move fast. Ministers are expected to take personal responsibility even for their team's failures. And resignations aren't about political theater, they're about integrity. Take the 2010 MRT breakdown, for example. It caused public outrage. But instead of deflecting blame, the transport minister faced a full review. Infrastructure was upgraded, and the system was rebuilt from the ground up. The goal wasn't optics, it was improvement. That's Singapore's version of accountability. Not finger-pointing, not endless debates. Just fix the problem. If Britain borrowed even a fraction of that mindset, maybe the news cycle would focus less on who shouted louder and more on who actually solved something. Lesson 6. Planning beyond elections. Here's one of the biggest differences between Britain and Singapore: time horizons. In Britain, most politics happens in 4-year cycles. Every decision, every promise, every budget shaped by the next election date. It's short-term by design, and that's why so many projects from infrastructure to housing get announced with excitement, then quietly abandoned once the headlines fade. Singapore took a completely different path. They asked one radical question. What if government wasn't built for the next election, but for the next generation? Here, long-term planning isn't just a slogan, it's policy architecture. Every major decision connects to a 10, 20, even 50-year roadmap. Housing policy, education, transport, water supply. Everything is tied to a vision that outlives any single leader. That's why Singapore built water independence decades before scarcity became a crisis. It's why the MRT keeps expanding ahead of demand, not behind it. And it's why, even when leaders change the direction, doesn't. In a world obsessed with short-term wins, Singapore's model reminds us that real progress happens when politics stops chasing headlines and starts building legacies. Lesson 7. Merit over popularity. In most democracies, popularity wins power. The politician with the best slogans, the sharpest sound bites, or the biggest crowd usually takes the prize. It's politics as performance, and Britain has mastered that art. But Singapore built something entirely different. Here, leadership isn't about how well you campaign. It's about how well you can govern. Ministers are chosen not because they're loud, but because they're capable, because they've proven they can deliver results. Before entering politics, most Singaporean ministers come from top civil service, academia, or management positions. They're selected through a rigorous meritocratic system, screened, trained, and mentored long before they ever appear on a ballot. And once they're in, they're paid well, deliberately, not as a reward, but as a safeguard against corruption and brain drain. It's controversial. Yes, but it keeps the country's best minds in government instead of leaving for higher-paying private jobs. Now contrast that with Britain, where charisma often beats competence and political theater overshadows technical ability. The result? Short-term leaders, recycled promises, and a system that rewards personality over performance. Singapore flipped that equation. It's not about who looks the part. It's about who can build the system. Lesson 8. No room for corruption. If you want to understand why Singapore works, start with one word: integrity. Because in Singapore, corruption isn't just discouraged, it's engineered out of the system. Back in the 1960s, Singapore was poor, chaotic, and vulnerable just like many post-colonial states. But Kuan Yew and his team made a ruthless decision. They would build a government that no one could buy. That meant 3 bold moves. 1, create an independent anti-corruption agency with real power, not political theater. 2, pay ministers and civil servants well enough that bribery isn't worth the risk. 3, make examples of anyone, no matter how powerful, who crosses the line. In Singapore, even senior officials and top executives have gone to jail for corruption. There are no untouchables. That sends a message. The rules apply to everyone equally. Now compare that to Britain, where donor money quietly shapes policies, lobbying firms influence parliament, and scandals fade after a few news cycles. Singapore's system is designed so those scandals never happen because the consequences are immediate, and the culture doesn't tolerate excuses. It's not about being perfect, it's about being fearlessly clean. Singapore proved that when corruption disappears, trust appears. And trust is the real foundation of any working democracy. Lesson 9. Accountability without chaos. In Britain, accountability often looks like chaos. Endless parliamentary shouting matches, partisan media wars, and scandals that drag on for months. It's loud, it's messy, and it doesn't always fix the problem. Singapore takes a quieter, almost clinical approach. Here, accountability isn't about drama, it's about discipline. When a mistake happens, investigations move fast. Officials are expected to step down or take responsibility without public theater. But here's the key difference: accountability doesn't paralyze the system, it strengthens it. Singapore built institutions that are feared for their precision. The Corrupt Practices Investigation Bureau, CPIB, can question anyone, even ministers, without political interference. And the country's leaders make it clear, no one is untouchable. Compare that to Britain, where inquiries can take years, where party loyalty often protects the powerful, and where media outrage replaces actual reform. Singapore's model shows that a government doesn't have to be chaotic to be transparent. It just has to be principled. Real accountability isn't about shouting louder. It's about cleaning faster. Lesson 10. Politics is engineering. Maybe the biggest difference between Britain and Singapore isn't ideology, it's mindset. In Britain, politics is a spectacle. Campaigns are theater, debates are battles, and leadership is often about winning arguments, not solving problems. Singapore stripped politics down to its core function: governance. It treats policy-making like engineering. You identify a flaw, test solutions, refine, and scale. That's why Singapore's politics feel boring to outsiders. No shouting matches, no scandals dominating headlines. But that's exactly the point. The system isn't designed to entertain. It's designed to work. And when governance becomes an engineering problem, not an emotional one, you get results that last generations. Conclusion. Britain gave the world the idea of democracy, but Singapore might just be showing what its next evolution could look like. A system where leaders are chosen for competence, not charisma. Where long-term planning beats short-term politics. Where accountability is measured by results, not noise. This isn't about East versus West. It's about the next chapter of governance, one that merges freedom with functionality. Because maybe democracy doesn't have to be loud to be real. Maybe it just has to work.